So, I would not be very happy if I were given a role because it is reserved for a woman. I would rather fight for it. I would rather compete and win that role because I am competent, I'm
Hmm.
capable. That is why I have got that role, not because I am a woman and there is a chair, reserved for a woman. So I sincerely believe that in the technology industry, people should be given a role based on their merit, not because of their gender or race or ethnicity or anything else. Now, having said that, there should be no bias either, that because this person comes from this particular region or this ethnicity or this religion or because of a gender, nobody should be biased or discriminated against. So everybody should be given a level playing field.
Welkom bij Women Disrupting Tech. Mijn naam is Dirk-Jan Hupkes en in deze podcast ga ik op ontdekkingsreis in de wereld van vrouwen in de technologiesector. Ik ga in gesprek met vrouwen die in tech werken of oprichter zijn van een tech-startup. Ik ga op zoek naar het antwoord op de vraag hoe zij er wel in geslaagd zijn om succes te hebben. Met andere woorden, hoe zij de technologiesector disrupten. Luister je mee? Hey, welcome back to Women Disrupting Tech. Today's episode is about making an impact of a different kind. Because while most women in this podcast are building an app or a service that makes this planet a better place, today's guest is saving everyone money. And she does so not by providing some SaaS platform, but by helping banks and regulators prevent fraud and detect money laundering. Sujata Dasgupta is the Global Head of Financial Crime Risk and Compliance Advisory at Tata Consultancy Services in Stockholm. She brings 23 years of experience in areas like Know Your Customer, sanctions, anti-money laundering, and fraud in banking, IT, and consultancy for businesses globally. In addition, Sujata is an award-winning industry leader who was featured among the 10 young and inspiring businesswomen to watch in 2021 by Tycoon Success magazine. And she was featured in interviews by, amongst others, The Economist and Bloomberg. In this episode, we'll talk about the changes that AI brings to the regulatory compliance field, how diversity helps to get better risk management, and we'll discuss how organizations can get more women to join and stay in tech. So, welcome to Women Disrupting Tech, Sujata Dasgupta. So, the first question that I always ask my guest is at the start of the podcast is how you got into your current job or into your current position, and start wherever you want.
Mhm. So, firstly, thank you so much, DJ. We've met at Amsterdam earlier during the Financial Times conference, and
Mhm.
I'm glad you invited me here to speak on this very important topic. It is also very close to my heart. So, uh, glad to be here. I started my career 23 years ago. So I was a banker. I started with India's largest bank. It's called State Bank of India.
Mhm.
Initially, I worked in India for a few years, and then I was posted in the bank's US operations, the headquarters at New York. So here I got the exposure of everything that happens in banking, at a branch
Mhm.
level to what happens at a corporate level. So I did retail banking and corporate banking. I did loans and deposits. I did payments to settlements, accounting to reconciliations, foreign exchange, risk and compliance, you name it. So that gave me a very strong exposure into everything that goes on in the world of banking. And my timing at New York in US was also soon after the 9/11 attacks, when this whole concept of the anti-money laundering, it all started there. So
Yeah.
I was right there at that point of the time. So it gave me a very good exposure, a very strong foundation into what I have been doing for the next 20 years now. So
Mhm.
after the bank, I eventually moved into IT services and consulting, primarily in the risk and compliance space. But then I specialized in the financial crime compliance. Earlier, it was more of AML and KYC. Now it has
Mhm.
become a much larger umbrella of what we call financial crime compliance. So
Mhm.
that has been my journey so far. Uh, I am now heading TCS's Financial Crime Compliance Advisory, and currently based in Stockholm in Sweden for the last 5 years.
Okay. How is it in Stockholm? I mean, you're Indian, so it must be terribly cold in the winter, right?
Yes, it is. I mean, weather-wise, yes, I come. I was born and brought up in a tropical country,
Yeah.
India, and then Sweden is, of course, so much polar.
Hmm.
But I have been fortunate to have traveled across the globe. So I've lived and worked in, say, New York, in London.
Hmm.
So they are, the cold. New York is the colder country where we had seen, not exactly like Sweden, but still quite cold temperatures and snow. But
Yeah.
then I've been on the other side of the world as well. I've been in Singapore, which was much warmer than India as well. So
Uh-huh.
probably my body's got used to all the confusion by now.
Okay, well that's good. Yeah, New York is can be really cold,
Yeah,
especially in the winter. So yeah,
yeah.
that I experienced that one day. Um, just to move on to where we are today in an age where when we both started in AML, it was really heavy on paper, all those processes, and now there's things like AI and ChatGPT. So does that also make fraud and money laundering easier to create schemes? Like, can you type in chat? I don't know. I've not tried this. But can you type in like, give me a money laundering scheme like a Nigerian prince or something like that, or a Nigerian prince letter?
Well, honestly, we have, like, both you and me have been working in this field for the last 20 years, and
Uh,
we have seen how, heavy paper based has moved from the manual effort to automation to where we are now. It's so much more digital, right? So technology is always invented for the betterment of our lives, right?
uh-huh.
It is meant to make our lives more convenient, more easy, and do a lot of data processing, assimilation in a much shorter period of time. So it's all meant for the good. But technology has always proved to be a double-edged sword, and even criminals have always used them for their benefit also. So when we were in the paper-based
Yeah.
world, there were paper-based frauds and crimes.
Uh-huh.
Now that we are in this age of, like you mentioned, the Gen AI age, the generative AI age, so now the crimes are of a different complexity.
Mm-hmm.
So we have seen in the world of the digital AI world, where we have seen the kinds of crimes that criminals have been perpetrating by using technology. We
Mm-hmm.
have seen cyber crimes and ransomware as a service, where a criminal sitting in one part of the world is actually hacking into the servers of uh, an organization in a different part of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So all these are happening because of technology enablement. So to your question about what can we expect with generative AI?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that yes, it will also give rise to various new kinds of frauds and crimes, because uh, if we think of what generative AI can do, well, it can do a lot of good things, as we have seen that it's been disrupting all industries for the better. But then
Mm-hmm.
criminals will also use it to their advantage. So
Yeah.
you think of writing texts and emails which are very realistic, very human like. So can we think of more business email compromises? Yes, probably yes. Can you think of more social engineering? Probably yes, because people will think that these emails are truly genuine.
Mm-hmm.
Then there is generation of voice cloning, synthetic voice cloning, where again it can be very close to real, cloning the real voice. So
Yeah.
again, people can be fooled into thinking that this is someone they know, but actually they're speaking to someone, some criminal who's actually cloned the voice. So this is where uh, the generative AI can generate content in the form of text, in the form of voice, in the form of videos, and create more social engineering, frauds, scams, manipulation, where people will be, consumers will be defrauded into something which we think is genuine but is not,
Mm-hmm.
because it is something being generated by criminals. So possibly yes, a lot more kind of complex crimes are about to come up.
Okay, so I recently read an article that you published about how financial institutions like bank are monitoring fraud. They can do that in real time,
Mhm.
but in money laundering, that's still more of an after the fact
Yes.
discovery thing.
Yes.
So if it's do you expect any issues with regulators then for banks because they're not able to catch it as it happens in fact where they are in fraud in the
Mhm.
area of fraud. Do you expect it to lead to more enforcement action then also?
But the thing about, the main difference between detecting fraud and
Mm,
detecting a money laundering activity
mm,
is that fraud mainly happens when somebody else is trying to steal the bank's customers' money. So it's,
mm,
in most cases, it's a third party trying to steal my customers' money. So
yeah,
that's where the banks are trying to identify whether the person who is doing the transaction is the genuine customer of the bank or not. So it's more of identifying the authenticity of the user.
yeah.
So it can be by profiling their devices, by checking their behaviors, their
Mhm,
identity, credentials, and all of that to validate whether this is the genuine customer or not. If it is not the genuine customer, then it's obviously a fraud, and that transaction is stopped.
uh-huh,
The difference with the money laundering is that in money laundering, it's always the customer of the bank. So there is never a problem with identifying whether it is the customer or not, because it is the customer of the bank. The problem is about identifying what is the intent of his customer,
uh-huh.
whether the customer is trying to do some terrorist financing or drug trafficking, or what is the purpose of that transaction. So it is the problem is about discovering the intent, discovering the reason for that transaction,
Mhm.
which becomes extremely difficult because everything else is in place. The
Yeah.
transaction is being done by the genuine customer, and identifying and then holding up a customer's transaction, suspecting it to be a money laundering or a criminal activity,
Mm.
is where the problem comes, because it requires a lot of analysis, based on which you would suspect, right? I mean, unless there is reasonable grounds to suspect, you cannot really stop a transaction. So that is why now we see that it always happens after a transaction is done,
Mm.
and that is how the regulators have also prescribed it, that they need to be reported. Suspicious
Okay.
activity needs to be reported.
Yeah.
But now times are changing, and to the article that you referred, that is about a guidance that Europe's EBA has provided, this guideline where
Yeah.
banks should also try to do risk-based monitoring of transactions on a real-time basis. But then there has to be those triggers where those triggers have to be identified, where it
Mhm.
looks to be suspicious, where then that monitoring has to happen on real time.
Yeah.
But then again, it is not something which can be done manually, because
No.
transactions happen in seconds. So that is where all this synthesis of data and analysis, all that has to be done in a matter of, say, 200 to 500 milliseconds. So obviously it's not humanly possible, and that is where, again, all this AI that you were talking about will have to come
Yeah.
into
So
play.
it does also give banks a lot of opportunities to, if they have implemented this kind of uh, at least the data collection part of it properly, they can also use start to use that data to now start detecting the patterns, right?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Because ultimately, the kind of data that we use for detecting fraud and detecting money laundering, there is a lot of overlap. We are
Mhm.
ultimately still
Yeah.
using customer data, account data, transactions data, their associated parties data. So yes, why not?
Yeah.
That whole the common database can be used to detect fraud as well as money laundering in the real time.
Okay, and just for context, for the listeners who don't know, the EBA is the European Banking Association, right?
European Banking Authority.
Authority, yeah. So is that a different from the ECB? Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, ECB is the European Central Bank.
Bank.
Yeah,
Okay, so just to give that in terms of context.
yeah, sure.
Um, so I read also somewhere that you consider yourself an internal optimist, and I found that quite interesting in this field, where if you start monitoring transactions, you see a lot of good things, but you also see a lot of bad things. So doesn't uh, uh, how do you keep yourself motivated to keep seeing the good things in people?
So you're right, DJ. I'm actually an eternal optimist, both in my professional and my personal life as well.
Yeah.
And working in this area, like you rightly mentioned, it is a dark space.
Yeah.
Trying to identify crimes and looking at criminals, the heinous crimes that they are committing, and how it is impacting overall, right? So we look at crimes like drug trafficking and human trafficking. Then
Mm-hmm.
there's environmental crimes like your illegal poaching and mining and waste dumping. Then there
Mm-hmm.
are social crimes like your bribery and corruption. So all of these crimes ultimately they impact our society, our environment. It disturbs the biodiversity. Then there is economic impact as well, because it sucks out huge amounts of money from the economy, which could have been used for the welfare of the people, but then they are they are stolen by criminals. So
Mm-hmm.
uh, I do see the dark side of things, but then the hope of people like me who work in this field, like you've also worked in this space, we are very passionate people and we want to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Even a tiny drop in the ocean, I believe, will help in eradicating some of these problems by diminishing the impacts of some of these crimes. So if we are able to stop even one crime or build some awareness so that people do not get defrauded, or we are able to save people from the impacts of all these the various kinds of crimes, I think we can make the world a little safer, a little better, and probably all our lives will be better. So
Yeah.
that is the hope which keeps me awake at night and wakes me up in the morning.
Well, that's okay. Great. That's yeah. I do agree that if even if you're in a position that you can actually prevent something bad from happening, that also gives you a lot of motivation to just continue doing the work that you're doing. I want to switch tracks a bit because you're in. Do you consider yourself more of a compliance slash risk person or more of a techie?
So I started my career in the banking industry, like I mentioned to you.
Yeah,
So my foundation has been more of a finance professional,
yeah,
specializing in the risk and compliance space.
yeah.
But then I have been in the IT industry for about 16, 17 years now.
Yeah.
And that is where I have learned to appreciate how technology can be used to enhance your risk management and compliance processes. So I
Hmm.
have put in a lot of effort to learn what the various kinds of technology can do. And especially in the last 5 to 7 years, where we have seen a huge disruption in terms of the various forms of AI. Even now,
Hmm.
we are seeing how generative AI is disrupting all various industries. So I try to keep myself updated on what is happening in the various technology world, and try to bring in those aspects into my risk and compliance function, so that I can advise banks better, and this industry can enhance its effectiveness and efficiency in terms of preventing crimes and fraud. So, uh, though I started out as a risk and compliance professional, and
Hmm.
I still am, I think now it's a good combination of both, where I'm able to leverage the various new technologies into doing the risk and compliance function better.
How has that changed over time? Because yeah, from obviously from paper based to much more
Hmm.
tech, but
Hmm.
does it also require you to have trainings on the tech side, like for instance on AI or?
So for me, yes, trainings are required, but the training is not on the the technical aspects. By technical aspect, I would mean the coding part or the
Uh-huh.
development part.
Yeah.
So I do keep myself upskilled by going through different trainings within my organization. Even I go for external trainings. So this
Mhm.
training is for me to understand what this new technology does. So we did speak a little bit about generative AI, right? So that
Yeah.
has been the buzzword for the last, say, 6 months or so.
Hmm.
So I have tried to learn by through a training. I have tried to understand what is this new technology, what does
Yeah.
it do, what are the benefits, what are the use cases, and then I try to implement it in my risk and compliance function. So yes, trainings are absolutely necessary. So I do upskill myself on trainings, but then I also read a lot, I write a lot as well.
Hmm.
So it's a holistic approach.
Okay. So yeah, for if you write these articles, you probably
Hmm.
also have to put in a lot of research. It's not something that's
Absolutely.
like a brain fart that is coming onto paper straight
Yes,
away.
absolutely.
And even then,
Absolutely.
even if it would be something that you wrote up like really easily, then you still would need to back it up and do the research for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So you're a woman in at the top of the risk pyramid at the moment. I had a question: Is taking risk a good thing, or because
I'll be very honest with you. Yes.
let me give some context also for the
Yes.
listeners, because I
Uh-huh.
when one of the things I found out over time is that for most people the first response is that risk is something terrible because something bad might actually happen, so you better listen to those guys. And I always try to say, well, what I have is an opinion. It's an educated opinion, of course, but risk comes with a reward. So that's hence my question. So,
Yeah. So, to the question whether whether I take risks or not,
mm,
from a very early age, I had very low risk appetite. I was a very conservative person, and like you rightly said, uh, high risk would come with a high reward.
yeah.
But I was always content with taking no risk or low risk, satisfied with a low reward. That is how I
Mm,
was,
yeah.
even from my early age. Even if you see my early investment patterns, that is the kind of person that I was. But then I've been working in this risk management function for over 20 years now,
Yeah.
and what I have learned during this process is we do not think about risk in isolation. We think about risk management. So what if there is a particular situation which has risk attached to it, right? So
Mm,
uh, possibly there is a big reward also, but uh, it's not just the reward that I'm attracted to. What I try to do is, for every risk, I think of what would be the consequences or the
mm,
negative impacts. If things were to go well, I would get the reward, but what would be my worst case scenario? So what would
mm,
be the negative impact? Now, is that something which is acceptable to me? That negative impact, is it within my appetite?
mm,
If yes, I go for it. If not, are the consequences something which I could mitigate? Is it something where I could put some controls in place which could possibly reduce either the impact or the probability? Is
mm,
there something I could do which could do any of these things? Again, if the answer is yes, I go for it, because I'm taking an informed decision. I'm doing my due diligence, right? I'm doing my
mm,
research. I'm taking an informed decision. So if the answer is still yes, I go for it. But even after doing all my controls and mitigations, even after that, if the consequences are beyond my risk appetite, I
mm,
drop it. I do not go for it. So to your question whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I would not say risk is a bad thing always,
mm,
provided you are doing your research, you're backing up that decision with with a certain plan in mind. I think it is fine to go ahead, because there will be a reward if things were to go your way. But if things do not go your way, you still do not lose as much, because in
mm.
life nothing will succeed all the time. So
No.
there will be some pluses, some minuses. So I think if we take the risks, but informed risks, I think it's worth to go for it, provided it's within your risk appetite.
Okay. Out of curiosity, do you think women get are raised with a lower risk appetite, I should say, than men? Are taught to take less of a risk in their lives?
I don't know about that. Honestly, I've not thought about that.
No.
But then, I've seen people. I mean, both men, women. They come from, they come with different views all the time, right? So, I again work with very very diverse teams across the globe, and
Mm-hmm.
I have seen people. Some of them are thinking on the lines that I do, right? That
Mm,
okay, we will see if it's within my appetite. We'll see if there are controls or mitigations in place. So there are people who think on the same lines. Some people, they would think like, if we have to move ahead, we need to take risks. Fine, if the risk, if it doesn't work in my favor, maybe 5 out of 10 times, maybe we will make it. 5 out of 10 times we may not make it. So I think it's about people's perspective. I'm not sure if it is gender based,
mm.
but I've seen different perspectives from people.
Okay, so you said that you are working with a diverse team. Let's switch tracks to that a bit.
Mhm.
Um, you're working for a global consultancy company.
Yeah.
What does that give you any benefit in terms of looking at risk and in terms of looking at fraud patterns and technological developments? You think?
Um, See, I think what I have seen again, working with again, so we have our own organization has offices across the world,
Yeah,
and we also have clients across the world,
yeah.
right? So it's perspectives in both ways, our own teams as well as our client teams.
Mm,
So we have seen that the kinds of frauds and the crimes that take place in different parts of the world are actually different. So, the kind of crimes that we see in Mexico may be very different from the kinds of crimes that we see in, say, a European country or an
mm-hmm.
Asian country,
Yeah,
right? So, it differs from region to region,
yeah,
and that is where we help clients of those regions to overcome those kind of crimes. So, we build diverse teams. So we bring in team members from that region as well as from from the other region, so that when we speak together, when we come together as a team,
yeah.
there is a lot of synergy which comes because people come with various different kinds of backgrounds and upbringing. So what I have seen in my early days in India has actually built my perspectives. Similarly, our team members who come from different parts of the world, they have seen different kinds of crimes and
Mm-hmm.
the kind of controls that were put in place. So definitely it helps when we have a diverse team coming from different parts of the world, different different backgrounds, different experiences. That really helps because each one has a different point of view, each one has a different idea to solve a certain problem. So that definitely helps. It becomes more synergized as a team.
Yeah, it makes it, well, I wouldn't say it makes it easier to detect problems, but it does make it easier to deal with them if they pop up somewhere totally different where it wasn't before.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say it's very easy to detect, but
Nah,
probably when we get together as a team,
yeah,
we sometimes hear of solutions which probably I could not have thought of, right? But it comes from somebody who has actually seen it somewhere,
yeah,
and they say that, yeah, this has happened in my country and this is how we think that we should look at it. So we are the people who are trying to fight crimes. So in order to fight crimes, we have to think like criminals, which does not
yeah,
come easy, right? So that is where different perspectives help. If somebody has been a victim of a similar crime, then we can take the help of that person trying to identify what has been the sequence of events, and then trying to piece together a story and then identify a solution to that. So
okay. Out of curiosity,
mm,
would you hire a criminal to catch a criminal?
well, you remind me of the movie Catch Me If You Can.
Yeah,
Well, that has been happening. In fact, I think was it Interpol or Europol where I read that I'm not exactly sure which organization it was, but they are uh, speaking with criminals to understand how the criminals think.
yeah,
I'm not sure if they actually hired, but they were speaking to those criminals to understand, the what is their thought process, how do they plan a kind of an attack, so that they could use those in order to actually catch criminals. So I cannot say that I would do the same in my team, but probably organizations like the enforcement teams are opening up to it.
okay. So I have an arrangement with one of my previous guests, Jacqueline van den Ende, that this podcast needs to be, well, obsolete in 10 years because then diversity in tech and women in high positions in tech companies are a normal thing. Um, what would be your recommendation to make this happen?
Well, I sincerely hope that this happens, DJ, because your podcast is about women disrupting tech.
Hmm.
And for me, I don't think there should be something like this. Why 10 years? It should not be even now, because it should not be about women in tech or a man in tech. It should just be a tech professionals in tech. That is how
Mhm.
it should be, because the industry that we are talking about is a skill intensive industry. It is about merit. It is about people who have the skill, the knowledge, the creativity, the passion to come up with new technology solutions,
Uh-huh.
use them in multiple different industries. So I think this is a skill based industry, and people should be uh, acknowledged based on the merit that they have. So I would not be very happy if I were given a role because it is reserved for a woman. I would rather fight for it. I would rather compete and win that role because I am competent, I'm
Mm.
capable. That is why I have got the role, not because I'm a woman and there is a chair, reserved for a woman. So I sincerely believe that in the technology industry, people should be given a role based on their merit, not because of their gender or race or ethnicity or anything else. Now, having said that, there should be no bias either, that because this person comes from this particular region or this ethnicity or this religion or because of a gender, nobody should be biased or discriminated against. So everybody should be given a level playing field. So
Mm.
if certain if there are certain segments of our society which do not have the same advantages as the other, I think organizations should try and level that up, give everybody that level playing field. So to just give you an example, where
Mm.
we are talking about women disrupting tech here, right? So
Yeah.
uh, in so many conversations, so many organizations are now talking about X percentage of women at at
Mm.
organization
Yeah.
level, say
Like the
40%
quota.
women representation at
Yeah.
the board level, or whatever levels. So why is it? I mean, we know half the world's population is women. Then why is it so difficult to have half the population in an organization? We know there are so many organizations which do not even have 20% women.
Yeah.
So why is it so difficult? Now, again, in my experience, I have seen that when students come out of their college or university degrees, uh, when they're just joining the workforce, there
Mm-hmm.
is roughly an equal balance between men and women.
Mm-hmm.
But then, as the careers progress, as they mature along the ladder,
Yeah.
women tend to drop off. Women either tend to drop off from the workforce totally, or they do not move up the ladder as men do. Now there
Yeah.
can be various reasons, right? There can be various reasons. I'm not not getting into those reasons, but what I can advise organizations is support those people who are capable and still not being able to continue in the careers. So there is probably some sort of constraint which is not allowing them to continue in their work, right? So they are
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
probably dropping off for personal reasons. So organizations could probably look at what is the constraint that the good people are leaving them.
Yeah.
So it's not about the gender, it's about if people are capable, organizations should try and help them to whether it's the training requirement, whether it's flexibility in working, whether it's giving them some sort of a sabbatical and then welcoming them back into the workforce. So all these kind of enablements need to be done, is what I feel. But other than that, it should be pure meritocracy.
I agree. Um, because you live in Sweden, and Sweden is slightly more advanced, at least than the Netherlands, in terms of giving equal rights to people. Uh,
Hmm.
do you think that's also how do you see that in your own organization in Stockholm? Then is that already happening, that people get equal opportunities and equal support? Because I know, for instance, that in Sweden, I think they have the same rights for fathers to take time off when they get a child as women can.
Honestly, I'm not so, I don't know the policy so much, so probably I will not talk too much about it.
Huh?
But I think what I have known in Sweden is it's not about my organization alone. There is a overall there is some some government regulations which everybody has to follow, which my
Mm.
organization also follows.
Mhm.
And since I do not have a child of my own, I don't know what are those regulations about. But
Mm.
yeah, I mean, in Sweden, the rules, the labor laws are pretty comfortable for both the genders, and that applies to all organizations, which even my organization follows. I do not know the exact specifications, but
Mhm.
yeah, they're quite comfortable is what I'm told, but I have not been a recipient of that
Okay.
policy.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for this great conversation, Sujata. Last question I always have is where can listeners find out more about you and wonderful work you're doing for TCS?
Well, I do a lot of work for TCS. I do a lot of work in the industry as well, where I'm constantly mentoring people. I'm publishing my own new ideas, new
Mhm.
thought leadership. I'm speaking a lot. So there's a lot of work that I do in the industry as well, in
Mhm.
addition to what I do for my clients at TCS.
Mhm.
I am very active on LinkedIn, so possibly our listeners can view my LinkedIn profile, and I generally keep it updated. So they should find all the information there.
Okay, and that's also where they can connect, right?
Yes, they can connect. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks very much again for this wonderful conversation. Really insightful. Also to get me a bit updated on the AML part and on the fraud and compliance financial risk area. So thanks very much. Also, listeners, very much. Thanks very much for listening, and you'll find all the information that Sujata referred to in the show notes. And with that, I hope you listen again in the next episode of Women Disrupting Tech. Well, that's it for this episode. Thank you for listening. Sujata and I hope that you enjoyed our conversation. If you did, please let us know via our socials. And you can find a link to Sujata's social media profiles and to her articles in the show notes at womendisruptingtech.blog. On the website, you can also subscribe to updates, and then I'll send you an email when a new episode is about to go on air. If you want to hear more episodes of the Women Disrupting Tech podcast, please follow the podcast on Spotify, Apple, Google, or on Goodpods. And if you want to contribute to more diversity in tech, please share the podcast with friends, family, and coworkers because this way you give my guests the platform they need to make this podcast irrelevant 10 years from now. Finally, if you want to connect with me, you can do that via the website, but you can also do that via LinkedIn. Just look up my name and you'll find me. Once again, thank you for listening, and I hope to see you in the next episode.